Hi, I'm Mario Guerra, the two-time former mayor of the great city of Downey. And you're watching Talking Downey with Mayor Mario. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about something that happened this weekend, besides Easter, that has brought the world together, and it's admiration for Pope Francis, who passed away on Monday morning. So last week was a jubilant week of Holy Week, if you will, where we celebrate Jesus' triumph and return, and also his resurrection. And then on Sunday, Easter, glorious day that we all enjoy together, celebrating the risen Christ. He is risen. Hallelujah. Monday morning, and then on Sunday too, we saw something really special. People there at St. Peter's Square did not expect the Pope to come out because he'd been ill for quite a few months. But he, in his pain, if you will, he came out, made an appearance, waved at folks, and even blessed a lot of different people and said a little prayer. So pretty miraculous, pretty awesome Easter. Here on the West Coast on Monday morning, we were all awoken with the sad news that the Pope had passed away in his sleep. And he passed away of a stroke and some heart failures. And we were all a little bit of a shock, even though in the last couple of months with him being sick, we thought about it. You know, we contemplated, we prayed for him, especially as a church. Many of you know I'm a deacon, so I've been at church all last week. And part of my silent prayers were for not only all the new Catholics that were coming into the world, but also for our Pope, for our leader. We were all kind of shocked, and okay, now what happens? And let's talk about him. I love the LA Times, the Tuesday headlines of the LA Times. Pope's empathy captivating the world. And I thought that was a great putting. As a man of peace is mourned. And I just thought what an amazing life he led, what an amazing leader, what an amazing, humble man he was, and he was the right time for our church. To give you some historical perspective, he was the 266th Pope of our church, successor to Peter, if you will, which of course was given that by Jesus himself. He was the first Jesuit Pope. He was the first from the Americas. He was also the first one to take the name Francis. And, you know, Francis, after Francis of Assisi. Francis of Assisi was a man of the people, a great saint that gave up all his power and wealth there to help others and to take care of disenfranchised. By the way, Francis was a deacon. He was not a priest. When I visited Assisi, Ian and I visited Assisi, and we went to his tomb and so forth, and we found a lot of different things, the history of what happened of St. Francis. And by the way, here's an interesting little side bit. I always get detracted, so I'm sorry. But in Assisi, in those days, the relics, the pieces of the body themselves, several times if somebody was special, they could be stolen. So the city of Assisi, which is kind of on a hillside, they buried him. They wanted to hide St. Francis. They figured some tomb raiders were going to come in and get his body. So they hid him, and they hid him so well that for hundreds of years, they forgot where they hid them. So one time they're tearing down this, it's like a chimney-looking thing with bricks, and they're tearing it down, and oh, there he is. So they stopped it, they left a big hole in it, and then they built this church all the way around it. So it's kind of a interesting little tidbit about St. Francis of Assisi, the St. Francis. But our Pope took the name St. Francis out of humility and out of deference to all the great things that St. Francis means to all of us. And you know what? He didn't disappoint. He was a big contrast from the difference of Pope Benedict. Arch conservative, more of the old time, if you will. So he was an interesting choice for what happened on there for him to be named Pope. So now what happens? Okay, so there's 252 cardinals, okay, in the world. And the cardinals are, the princes of the church. but only those under the age of 80, okay, which is 135 of them, only they get to vote. Vote's the wrong word. They're inspired by the Holy Spirit to cast their lot for the new Pope. But in 108 of them, so 80%, Pope Francis elevated to cardinal. So that's kind of an interesting thing. So hopefully that'll continue in the movement of what he wanted to see for the church. He took away, he started changing things that cardinals, instead of being in the big central areas, they would be on the peripheral outskirts of some of these countries, if you will, because he was trying to bring the marginalized and all those back into the church or into the church to start with. So he named some real interesting choices of cardinals in a good way, if you will. So, okay, so what happens now? So, now we go to stage 2 of the process that happens when a pope passes away. And there's so much that we can continue to talk about Pope Francis, but a lot of the media, you've been seeing it, you've been watching it, but it's pretty amazing. So I wanted to give you a little bit more of the process, if you will, in the church on there. So stage 1, of course, was the confirmation of the death, which traditionally it's a ceremony calling the Pope's baptism named 3 times to confirm his passing. Stage 2 is the official notification and announcement of the Pope's death, which begins a period of mourning and funeral preparation. So we're already in stage 2. Stage 3 is going to be the funeral and the burial. And right now, all the cardinals in the world are descending into Rome and into St. Peter's. It's already been announced. It'll be, for us here, it'll be at 1 a.m. on Friday when the funeral will happen. So, but right now, they just moved his body into St. Peter's this morning, during which time he'll lie in state and in Rome for the public to pay their last respects. It was interesting to see him and how he was moved and the moving, touching sentiments of so many there, because he meant a lot to all of us. He prayed for us all and we prayed for him, but he was a great leader for the 1.4 billion Catholics throughout the world. Remember, the United States has, 400 million people. So when you think about it, the 1.4 billion Catholics on there, it's a big portion of our world, if you will, that he was a spiritual leader besides being, also a head of state from being the head of the Vatican. So after the funeral, the Pope is normally buried beneath St. Peter's, in Rome. Although St. Francis already revealed in 2023 that he wanted something different. He's going to be buried at St. Mary's Maggiore in Rome. It's a church that's devoted to St. Mary. And remember, to Mary, remember he went there. He had a deep devotion and a love for Mary. And everywhere time that he visited a country and he was going on one of his official visits, he would go there before to pray, and he would come back. When he came back, he would go there first to pray and to thank Mary for her guidance over him and all his prayers. So he's going to be buried there. He's also chosen a simpler casket, and he's also chosen the name on it will just be Francisco. It'll just be Francis. They won't say Pope, and it won't say the dates, and it won't say on there on his tomb. It'll literally just say Francisco, which goes back to the humbleness of him. He had this way about him. He changed the world so much by not judging others and saying that. It started out, we see that at the very beginning of his pontificate when he was in an airplane, somebody asked him about, our gay and lesbians and LGBTQ, and his answer, changed the world in so many directions by him saying, who am I to judge? Who am I to judge? Which is something that we would think that Jesus would say. And that started a lot of discussion and some dissension. On my personal social media posts, I've gotten some dissensions about his visit to Cuba and about some other things, some hardcore Catholics weren't happy with him on certain things. But you know what, though? He was the humbleness of the man and the goodness of the man. And it all started, if many of you remember, when he was first elected Pope, he wanted to go back and pay his bill at his hotel. And there's that famous picture of him at the counter paying, $200 for his week stay at that hotel. And then when they first gave him the Pope's shoes, the red Prada shoes, and he says, "I'm not wearing that." And he put on his simple black shoes. They were actually a little bit dirty that he had been walking in for so many years. So that naturally blended together and won our hearts over right away. So what else did he do? Well, in addition, Francis' commitment to calling on the world for climate change, for example, was just unprecedented. In May 2015, Francis, he published an encyclical called, and I'm going to mispronounce it, Advocacy. And it's a papal letter to all the bishops to guide their work and kind of address to all his people of goodwill on the climate crisis, if you will. First pope that's ever even talked about that. He took a lot of heat from that, from the climate deniers, if you will. And 8 years later, he built on this initial encyclical and he published an apostolic, and I always say that wrong, exhortation Laudate Dom, and basically saying the world is nearing the breaking point and condemning climate denial and calling for urgent climate action. Because he also brought the climate change to the forefront and he challenged everyone to recognize that because he thought it hits the poorest the hardest. And we see that in so many different countries throughout the world. So again, he's always thinking of the poor, the disenfranchised, those who are left behind. And he never tired of defending those displaced migrants or embracing the marginalized or those excluded. And unlike the previous popes, he lived a pretty modest life. As the 266th pope, he chose to live in a 2-bedroom modest apartment in the Santa Marta residence, which is a guest house at the Vatican, instead of the big palace where his predecessors lived. His commitment to helping the poor and the marginalized, as well as his advocacy for the environment, brought a new era of reform into the Catholic Church, and it's something we continue to follow and look forward to. But the key thing was his love for children, the love for people, his love for taking care of the poor, and the disenfranchised, and his commitment to follow the teachings of Christ. Some say that he didn't follow the teachings of the church, but that could be argued in different ways. And I think some of the right-handed conservatives in the church have different views and so forth. As a matter of fact, this is in today's LA Times too. Who gets to vote on this? Well, for the first time, there won't be a California cardinal in the conclave. So Cardinal Roger Mahoney, that lives here in Los Angeles, he led the archdiocese from, I think it was 85 to 2011. So he's excluded from voting for a couple of reasons. Number one, he's 89 years old and is older than the conclave participants, can't be over 80. And then his involvement in some of the scandals in the church prohibited his involvement in public or administrative duties. So the only cardinal that used to be from here, Cardinal McEnroy, he was a bishop in San Diego, and he was appointed Archbishop, Cardinal first, and then Archbishop of the Washington, D.C. Archdiocese, and he'll be going back there voting. This expert here, David Gibson, on the Center of Religion and Culture of Fordham University, and he said that Archbishop Gomez of Los Angeles, he's unable to participate because he's not a cardinal. He's an archbishop of the largest archdiocese in the world, if you will. But his opinion that Francis considered his views too conservative to elevate him to cardinal. This is David Gibson. Whether I agree with it or not is a different story. But I think we're going to see a period of mourning, I think, for after the conclave. And, we've all seen the movie Conclave now. There's a lot of fiction in there, but there's some truth to how it's done. When they go into, there's a lot of secrecy involved, but there's a lot, there's 252 cardinals, 135 cardinals that are making the decision. And everybody talks about the vote and the vote. Okay, well, it's not supposed to be a vote. It's supposed to be how the Holy Spirit moves them and to vote or to choose the successor to Peter. And that's what they go into it with. And I do believe that most of the cardinals go into it with that. All the predictions of who can be and what and the whole thing, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We just have to trust the Lord, have to trust the process. And we know that if we can get somebody like Francis, whether we'll ever have another one from the Americas anytime soon might be a different story. But obviously those cardinals 12 years ago felt something and heard the calling and answered the calling. So anyways, I just wanted to have this special episode today to talk a little bit about Pope Francis. He's impacted my life just by his teachings. I think about the things that he's taught. I think about the humanity and the humanness of his message, if you will. Pretty much talking about, the church. We shouldn't come into the church to hide. We should come into the church to use it as a field hospital to take care of each other and others. So there's so many different teachings that he gave me personally, that he's given the world, and a great example to emulate as a person of faith, but as a person who loved everyone. So I welcome your comments. Please keep praying for him. Please pray for the Catholic Church, which has such an influence on the world, whether you're Catholic or not, and that's okay. But we are together a body of Christ, even if you're not Christian, even if you're of the Jewish faith or, a Muslim faith. But Christians answer the call to serve. I'm a deacon in the Catholic Church. This last week on Holy Thursday, I renewed my vows, if you will, 23 years. But we renew our vows to imitate Christ and to live as one in charity and to serve others. And I'm very proud of that. That's exactly what the diaconate calling is. So I've been ordained 23 years this year, and I do follow the teachings of the church on there where we're supposed to love one another and love our neighbors and love God above all of us. And I feel the commitment that Pope Francis had was something that was special to us all. So I hope that this gave you some things to think about. I hope that this show nourished you a little bit, at least gave you some of the process in the Catholic Church. But I think the whole world is now praying for the soul and repose of a beautiful man, a humble servant. Rest in peace, sir, good and faithful servant. God bless.